Good morning, everyone. This is Julie McDonald with Microcom Technologies, and I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar with Fanvil. Today's host is Tommy Lee, and he is the Vice President of Sales in North America, and he'll be presenting today. If anyone has any questions, please submit them in the question box, and Tommy will be able to answer them at the end of today's presentation. Tommy, thank you so much for being with us today. I am finished for now. Please go ahead and take it on over.
Thank you for the introduction, Julie. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for your time. Today, what I'm going to be presenting is the Fanvil SIP Security Industry Solutions. This is a little bit outside of our popular telecommunications endpoints, and that the goal of this presentation is to really allow those that are just on the verge of exploring those endpoints that are outside of just telecommunications. These are things like intercoms, door access units, and it makes you wonder a little bit because you're going, gee, with telephones, you have this provisioning services that work, but not all PBXs actually have provisioning services that cater to all of these different intercoms. Fanvil does, but in the industry, you go, wow, there's no display. How do I go ahead and get, the IP address? How do I get into the configuration? Where are all the downloads? So my agenda is to getting those that are just about thinking about expanding their portfolio and offering these other SIP-based endpoints and exploring that intercoms and door access units are really ways that you could expand your solution set offering. And my idea is just to allow you to get the engine started. I'm not going to get into the bits and bytes and knowing how to configure buttons and everything. But what I will intend to do is to go ahead and tell you how do you go ahead, get inside these units. And I have a unit that's sitting right side by me to give you an idea of what it takes to go. Now, I can't assume that everybody out there is going to be, familiar with Fanvil, so I'm just going to set aside one slide, but here's my basic overall agenda. I'm just going to go through what we call our I series. I series is really what we call our intercom or door access unit. So anything that you see part starting with an I really is going to be really an I series type of solution. Then I'm going to focus in on our I6 series, which is a brand new door access unit that we have, and do a deep dive on it. The great news about the i6 is that once you get into the i6 and knowing how to get it started, all of the rest of the units really function the same exact way. How are there differences? Because some have one button, some have all buttons, some have no buttons. But I want to show you where all the toolboxes are so you could feel comfortable. And if you don't feel comfortable, feel free to give me a call. I'm here to kind of guide you through. And we also have an East Coast factory SE that's based here as well to sort of help you through the idea. And of course, we have some really NFR sample and bundles and things like that we provide to our prospects and clients out there that'll enable you to sort of test drive it to see if this is something that works for you. So without that said, what I'm going to do is go right into it. Now, I'm just going to set aside one slide to really allow you to kind of give an overview about all the solutions that Fanvil does. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Fanvil, we're about somewhere between 150 to 175 people throughout. Most of our staff is really R&D, and we actually have people that are actually based in each of the major regions. We have people that are in Europe, Middle East. I'm here based in North America. And we also have SEs. That's another differentiator that you want to think about, because when you're bringing in a brand new solution, you want to make sure that the manufacturer, as well as our representatives, such as Microcom, to be out there and supporting your needs. So where do we differ? Fanvil actually develops endpoints, and all of these endpoints are all SIP-based. They're not analog or doing anything like that, but all of these items that you see here, most of the people that are familiar with Fanvil know us by our SIP desk phones, and we have desk phones that are targeted for the business area, as well as really a set that's focused for the hospitality market as well. So those two things take care of that. But what I'm going to focus in more on is really the SIP door access solutions and intercoms. It's really these three solutions here that I want to kind of get into. You say, wow, you know, I've done most of my life, 90% is telecom. How do I go ahead and expand the offerings and providing, you know, these door access units? They don't have displays. How do I get access to them? And that's my idea in really getting you through. Now, for those that are real veterans in deploying these things, this is just going to be a slight review. Maybe you might get a couple of tips or two, but I'm just going to kind of get in for those who really are targeted at expanding it and trying to see if these solutions are right for you. And the great news is that we also have a device management system, which we call FDMCS. This is a free service that we provide to all of our partners, which allows you to go ahead and really provide auto deployment, not only to our phones, but all these units here. And we're one of the few endpoint units that actually are qualified on many of the popular PBXs out there that allow you to auto deploy these units out there. But as you will note, I'm going to go into some of these menu-driven interfaces, and there's a lot more configurations that you're going to have to do. So either way, it may get you to register and get it working, but you're going to have to go in and work out all the configurations, which I'll get into very, very shortly. So with that said, let's kind of go over what the I-Series overview is. Now, let's just start off with the SIP door phones. Now, these are items that really function very much like you know, a desk phone or any wireless phone that we have out there, but these are units that really sit outdoors. And these units are really built with a level of ruggedness. We have items that we just released here called the i6. These are just all rolling out into our distribution channel as we speak. We have solid state features, and one of the solid things that you can guarantee is that all of them have wide angle video ports, so they all support video. They also support RFID cards, and many employees or even home members in residential and businesses may have an RFID key fob or a card that they can go ahead and swipe. And you can actually use all of these units, not only the i6, but the i3, which we've been selling for the last several years, to gain access into it. And then the business itself has some sort of a log of you going into it. And you say to yourself, how do I get into these type of things? And that's what I intend to do. And all of these things really conform. When we went from the i3 to the i6 series, one of the things that we've done is become a little bit more standardized. You know, we began to start supporting WeGAN interfaces, on-VIF type of support, and we realized as we began to learn the requirements of the local market, we started incorporating these standardizations. Why? Because it ends up shortening the time that our partners go ahead and do and implementing these things. And I'm just going to really try to go into these things to allow you to get started and getting into these things moving forward and how to get the engine started. Because once you know how to deploy phones, then you know how to deploy these things as well, as you will know. So what I'm doing now is I want to show you with intercoms. The big difference between intercom and access units is that intercoms don't have a keypad. They're really very simple devices. They're just one button that allow a simple access to a specific party, or you have some with two buttons here or two buttons here that really allow a simple interface. For example, you might have a business that has a backloading dock, and you don't necessarily want them to dial a 4-digit extension or what have you. Just say you load it up, push a button, it's very straightforward. Or you could be on a campus situation where in case of emergency, or you want to dial something from the front desk on a reception list type of person, then it could go ahead and ring one or several individuals, and you could have both video as well as audio input that goes directly to them. You know, these things are very popular in hospitals, education, and many different things. And some actually have video and some don't. So this is just a small snapshot of all the different type of things that we have. But out of all of these units, we have units that are even designed to fit outdoors in an outdoor parking lot, where it has rain guards, where it really will allow for people that protects the unit through rainfall, through snow, cold and warm weather as well. So it really can handle most situations. And not only outdoors, but we also have indoor units as well. So on our indoor stations, we actually have indoor stations. We have 2 units that are actually coming up now that are marked new. These are really Android-based indoor stations, and that allows for a lot of expandability. Many new buildings these days want to have some level of visibility without necessarily seeing a phone, because the great news about having an Android indoor unit, you could then use that to really expand and do lots of other items. Like there are many third-party Android applications that you might be able to run that may allow for room-to-room intercomming and all that stuff that you can have throughout your apartment. But what these things do is actually provide you a big screen without having a big phone. Aesthetically speaking, I know my spouse wouldn't allow me to have my wife hanging a big phone on the wall because she thinks it's ugly, but at the same time, having something like this hanging on the wall is far more aesthetically acceptable. You might have a different situation where it's fine, but it may work for residential. Businesses care far less, but these type of options exist, and we have stuff that we're selling right now from the i56, 53, 51, and 52 that provide touchscreen capabilities, all level of capabilities that'll give you a screen that when you open a door access unit or an intercom, it allows you to see who is outdoors. Is it the postal service person? Is it the UPS, Federal Express, etc.? And you could just go ahead and push a button either on a touch screen or these buttons here that will allow easy access to get in. And we have some future models coming in too that we're going to show up as well. Beyond just those doors, now for those that have control centers, take for example education. Many people like to go ahead and speak into microphones, and we have units that don't have microphones. So we have both touchscreen units via the A53, and then we have those that are just the X210 that are push buttons. So really, depending on the type of interface you have, these interfaces were designed to support H.264 VGA screens so that you can actually deploy either our access units or any third-party IP camera that you can go ahead and display on this phone and be able to have either a touchscreen access or a button-based access. This is really personal preference, and these two are really provided for your end customer to see what they like and enjoy the most. Okay, and this really provides a central code so they can see who's actually there at your front door. Last but not least, this is also a very popular unit. Beyond just having outdoor and indoor, you have situations when you're upgrading a building and you say to yourself, wow, or an education system, you have a PA system that's totally working. You have a PA speakers that work. They're probably accumulated tons of dust under a drop ceiling situation. They're driven by an amplifier, but when you upgrade it from an analog into SIP, what do? Instead of upgrading all of the wiring and the end speakers from analog into SIP, you can really save your clients some money if you want to by just upgrading and providing a SIP interface into that system. So you could use the PA3 to really answer a SIP call. So you could assign a specific room or an office, a specific extension, or the entire building, with the PA3, and have this drive the amplifier. And that amplifier will then push all that SIP call throughout all the different speakers that it will do. I'm not going to get into the differences between the PA2 and PA3, but these are the different type of things that we can do that. Another idea are lifts or elevators where you can go up and down. What do you do when the front desk has been upgraded from an analog system into SIP? You can, pardon my coughing, you can use this gateway on the elevator to allow a SIP call to an elevator, or vice versa. We have a button interface that allows you to put in an emergency button in the elevator, so when you press it, if the elevator gets stuck in between floors, it could then initiate a SIP call directly to the front desk over SIP. I call this sort of the Swiss Army knife into it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus in on the i6 and do a deeper dive. And again, I'm not going to get into configuring all the time bases, but the idea here is to what do you do when you get one of these units and to get the engine started. With the i6 series that's rolling out to distribution now, we have really 4 units. i61 and i62 are really basic, are really the same units. The i62 is a button-based unit that really allows for physical buttons. A lot of people are more susceptible because if they wear gloves and everything, they don't want to necessarily subject themselves to a solid state. In residential, this is more popular because this is a little bit smaller, and it could also have an RFID card, but both really do the same thing. Those that are button-based can do this, and the great news is that all of them support IP66 and IK07, which provides basic standards of waterproof and dustproof resistance of all of these units. So they're really built rugged to handle a lot of the weather. And you have the I-63, which provides multiple offices where you can look at multiple things. These could be looked at as DSS keys on a phone, but in this case, it's really ruggedized to be able to do that, but you don't necessarily have a display. The I-64, on the other hand, actually is a base unit that gives you a keypad, which really provides the end user some flexibility. You might have a directory on the side that really provides this. And now moving forward, we're going to actually expand these lines to actually expand it so that you're going to have a larger display, which then can provide a list of tenants or people that are inside. So these are the base units that we've expanded and gotten to get into. Some of the nice things that we have is that they all contain loop antenna compatibility, which means that if someone has a hearing aid and they have a hard time hearing, they can go ahead and press this, which allows it to really interface with people with, a wireless hearing aid, so that they can hear the interface much more louder. And they're all proximity sensors to turn on when you're in range. So when it's off, you're not going to have these lit things, but when it senses that someone is on, they will actually turn on and engage in who you want to do, and you can configure it to really log in their snapshot of their pictures, either on the unit itself, or you can have it log it on a third-party server, depending on how you want to do, because built in is a 128 gigabit memory card that you can have and store all of these units inside it. So it's really up to you and how do you want to go ahead and configure these units. And again, I want to go in and talk about its strong and durability. These things are really made to be surface mounts. These back plates are an optional unit to it, but they all can be powered in a PoE environment. You can go ahead and have a Cat5 or Cat6 cable running to the front door, and then you can just go ahead and mount these things. And again, this is just a repeat on all of the different temperature ranges that these units can go ahead and do. Okay. A little bit more capability. This is just for your reference. In many cases, we've done many cases in the I-64. All of them have a wide angle camera so that you can go ahead and see who's there. They all have a relay that can actuate an onboard relay. It could be a mag door opener or a relay lock. It depends on all you want to do. And aesthetically pleasing, it's a little bit more, how would you say, residential friendly or commercial friendly. Many of the other ones were silver. You don't necessarily want to have that at your front door because it looks too commercial, but this is kind of a good hybrid between the two. And of course, obviously, all of these units are really designed to interface not only just with phones, but you can really go ahead and put in many different things. You can have it set off alarms. You can interface with indoor stations and now IP phones, as I said, electronic door locks. Very often when we go into a department store, all of these things open up, and then yet you can go inside it and you can relay these triggers, but you can also have push buttons. People that are on wheelchairs, you can push it and then it'll automatically open the door as well. And you can actually program when these things operate and when they turn on and turn off. One thing that is also key is that many people that are online are very familiar with Microsoft Teams. This is just one of many different software applications that you can fit onto your mobile phone or your mobile device that allow our i6 series to really interface with what we have is we have a cooperation with CyberGate, SAS, that will provide an interface into Microsoft Teams so that anybody who has a Teams mobile app on their application can also use this as an in-between bridge that'll bridge video and audio so that you could push a button and then allow people to go ahead and gain access to your office through all of these different things. So these are all the different units that we have moving forward. Now let's go ahead and move on forward to the deep dive. I'm just going to show 2 units here, and this is just going to give you an idea. I have next to me this I-64, which kind of gives you an idea. You go, gee, under normal circumstances, you might be able to look at your network in the background, but in most phones, you have a display that could display the IP address. Here, there is no display. How do you go ahead and do that? When you open up the rear, you'll actually see this console in the rear of the unit, and this is where the PoE plug plugs right in. It's an Ethernet port, and you can actually have all kinds of connectivity here that provides you with all different types of relay connections, triggers, sensors, all of these different things here, and you can provide that at a toolbox, which I'm going to go ahead and show you. But how do you get an IP address? Here's the DSS key and the dialing keys, and they all change depending on what model you actually decide to use moving forward. So first off, how do you go ahead and get an IP address? Because there's a key in getting an IP address. The one that I use most often is, of course, method one. You can get an application to see what new IP address just appeared on your network, because all of these support DHCP and it loads it on the address. Well, what method two is that for my set, you can actually press the DSS key for 3 seconds after you power on the unit. Once you power on the unit, it'll be active for about 30 seconds after pressing it. And then after pressing it, you'll hear a beep. And once you hear the beep, you can go ahead and actually push another dial key in parallel with that key. And all of a sudden, the unit itself will announce what its local assigned IP address. Once you get the assigned IP address, you could then put that IP address onto your browser, of which you can then go ahead and access the GUI. Okay, and once you access the GUI, depending on what browser you use, you'll end up seeing something like this. And anybody who is familiar with updating their phones and everything, this goes through the same thing. And the one thing that you want to do is to be able to download firmware, to go into the system download. So what do you want to do? Why don't I go ahead and kind of demonstrate that on the side here for a second and kind of show you what we did. And so I'm going to go ahead and expand this here. And I've gone ahead and loaded my local IP address, which is 10.134, and the admin, the default admin is admin over admin. And that's the default address. I highly recommend anybody who's going to go ahead and configure this to obviously change this. This is really, second nature to many, but I use this just for demonstration purposes so that you can kind of get in. It gives you the idea so you don't have to necessarily look up. This is what I necessarily find when you go ahead and take a look at this, and then you can kind of press upgrade as the first thing you want to do. And what you want to do is then go ahead and press select to really provide a software upgrade. Now, keep in mind, I'm doing the manual. You could do all of this via the device management system, but once you get it to understand how to do it manually, where do you find the firmware as well as the special tools? Well, let me go ahead and show you where they're all located. You can go to the Fanvil website here. Whoops, sorry about that. The Fanvil website here and actually go to support and go to the download center. This is where you'll find all the support firmware. These are all the V-Series IP phones, but what we're talking about today is the SIP security industry products. And I want to go ahead and focus in on the i64. And when you press on the i64, here is the actual firmware document and actually related videos. This is a toolbox that's really valuable to all of our partners out there, and now that it defaults to firmware, you can actually download the latest and greatest firmware, and you can go ahead and bring this down, and you can go ahead and upload that onto the actual device here. And once you've got this selected, you can go ahead and put the URL here after you download where it is on your PC, do an upgrade, and it does the upgrade for you. Okay, it's really that simple, but then yet once you get used to doing this manually, then you can move forward and taking care of this and doing this automatically for many of the deployments that you have moving forward. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. Now you talk about the iPhone door setting. You go talk about the default password. Of course, you want to customize it for security. The default in both cases is admin by out of the box, but once you go ahead and change it, I highly recommend that you remember what that password is. Otherwise, it's a pretty, you have to go through a factory reset, which is not an easy task to do. Then when you look into the actual SIP account, this SIP account will look very familiar with the SIP accounts for those who actually deploy telephones. So once you've actually got that onto your SIP account, I won't no longer do this on this slide set. What I'm going to do is actually go back into lines here, and I'm going to actually do it on the line here. You could actually go ahead and actually design up to 1 or 2 different SIP accounts on all of these devices. Obviously, these things that go ahead are inactive, and you can activate this here. For those who are very familiar with Fanvil phones, this is what the interface that you find not only on our phones, but you can find on every single phone. It's going to ask you for the username, the display name, authentication user, password, as well as the server name. These are the standard prompts that every IP phone or every IP address or SIP device will be asking you. So this should be no different moving forward. Okay, then you could declare things like SIP hotspots. This is a unique feature that Fanvil offers that enables the end user to really declare a hotspot scenario where you can have multiple phones declare. You can actually make this intercom or access unit a dial, part of the hotspot so that you can have multiple phones ring. You can do that via the PBX, or you can do that through many other items as well. Now let's getting back into the next idea here. We have DSS keys. Now with DSS keys, these are the real function keys that you saw on the thing, and as you notice on the I63 and 64, these are the different things that you can configure to do what you want. On the actual screen, you will actually see on the function key that you could really define what you want to have these keys to do. You could have it as a key event, a memory key, multicast listening, action URL. This is very similar to what you find in phones. And the subtype, you can have this as a hands-free, autoplay, volume up, volume down. Many different glocks that's really done. These are the default settings that you can go ahead and configure on the actual phone. And then you can go ahead and modify these different keys on the advanced settings as well, okay? I'm not gonna get into the real nitty-gritty detail, but this gives you an idea of what's actually inside of these units moving forward. Next unit is phone door settings. Now, many people use EGS. I found out through the internet that there are hundreds of different things called EGS. I call this as the entrance guard system, and then you can go ahead and really outline what you want to do in all of these different configurations on the inside. So let's skip over to the actual unit and see what all types of availability. I'll go into the EGS settings, and in the type of card, you can have a thing where you can have basic settings, relay mode, monostable, bistable. What does that really mean? That means that you can have a single action or a double action. You could have two units and doors that could be unlocked, or a single door. Again, I'm not here to go through all of these different things. You can configure your relays here where you have door sensor 1, door sensor 2. You can go through all of these different features and options that you have here. You can configure your RFID card or a key fob moving forward. Here you can go ahead and have a whole list of all the employees, staff that have access or residences that you could have a whole list of people that you can go ahead and add it on here. The great news about the iSeries is that you can use it as an authoring tool. So if you have brand new cards or key fobs, you can actually add on brand new key fobs on it as well as people come in. But the most popular one are passwords. The default password is really out of the factory is 6789 for local and versus remote, which is just the star key. What's the difference between remote and local? Local means that anybody who shows up at your door can press 6789 and be able to gain access. Obviously, you would go ahead and change that to whatever key code that you want to go and have access. But then for people that are calling in remote, you can call in remote, and if you happen to recognize who that person is, you can go ahead and send a speed dial of an asterisk key in this case, and that will go ahead and provide that button to be able to give them access. Great news is that you could set up time profiles of when it's active or inactive, because you may only want to enable this during business hours so that you can go ahead and configure all of these things moving forward. So that kind of gives you a kind of a capability of all of these different things. Door unlock setting, I think I went into this on the EGS before, so I won't need to go through all the different details on getting that set up. Local remote password, I just went through on the actual remote. On the default password, it's 6789, and obviously the asterisk key if you want to go ahead and do this via remote key. The other key thing is the camera setting. How do you want to go ahead and set up the camera? This is a great deal because what I'll do is I'll go back to the Intercom and look at the Intercom settings, and then you could look at up here and set up the camera settings. This camera setting is really defaulted to H264, which is the default VGA. Not only can you use our indoor station displays, which is the flat screen, or our IP phones, but any phone or monitor or camera can actually capture a streaming video that's sent across RTSP information. And what this does is this really allows for this standard to get a streaming live video, and you just have to go ahead and read the streaming video that goes from what your local IP address is onto whatever, so that you can see it on a monitor. You can use this to see it on an actual, Fanvil IP phone or an Fanvil indoor station. You can go ahead and configure all of the settings via your camera here, whether you want to go ahead and set image mode for auto, night mode, day mode. You can have it go ahead and set all of these different things in white balances, okay? I'm not here to tell you all of these things, but the great news is that you can set this thing up to support multicasting throughout your network. You can have media settings where you can actually control what type of media. You can assign different codecs that you want. And then as well, you can also set up different times and dates and date plans that you want to go ahead and do for all the different intercom settings moving forward. And last but not least, almost the last thing is the basic intercom settings. I think I went over the basic features here, where it gives you the ability to support call waiting, auto answer. These are the really type of things. Now, the thing I wanted to point out is that not only can you allow an IP call, which you can give it the capability of calling Domino's Pizza if you want to from the thing, or if you just have this deployed locally in-house, you can actually have this unit speak to the actual endpoint, and you don't even need a PBX for that matter. You can speak it using SIP point to point and really bypass that whole unit if it's all internal. On the other hand, if you have to call in outside from a remote unit external, you'll need a PBX for that. But if you want a simple unit for just door access, you can do this point to point from this unit to a Fanvil desk station or an IP unit and have it control that without necessarily having a PBX or multiple ones. And that's what we have moving forward. And the last but not least is we have an NFR sample. This is sort of gives you a budgetary idea, but we put together a program which will allow you, and at the end here, we allow you to go ahead and put some door access units here where you could have an I-64 with an indoor station at a very low price. This isn't your actual price, but we can come very close. That gives you a major, not for resale price, that'll give you ability to test drive these products at a far below market rate. And we also have them for phones as well. So this really combines both units to give you sort of an easy access and really test driving these things moving forward. That's the last slide that I have. I hope it's really, I answered a lot of your questions. I will hang around here for as long as you want, and I'll pass the floor back to Julie, and I'll stick around to address any questions you might have moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tommy, so much for that wonderful presentation. And of course, it looks like we've got some questions from the audience. So let's get started with the first one.
Yes.
Let's see. This is what we have here. Since they are all SIP phones, what are the wattages for the devices for it to run on batteries if possible?
With batteries, there is an external, I think it's 12 volts or something like that. If it runs on batteries, there is a 12 volt input. In fact, let me just default that. In fact, if I went to, hang on just a second, I might be able to answer that question right now. On the very first one where I went and showed the input, hang on just a second, right, whoops, sorry about that. Let me find, oh, here we go. Like right here, here's the power interface. Like here is the input. If you were to open up the back, there are two sets of shorts. If you actually have a battery, you can actually run this with a 12 volt 1 amp input, positive, up and down, and grounded in here. And you could actually go into that toolbox that I showed you on our Fanvil support page, where you can go in. I highly suggest you go into the quick information guide. The quick information guide will give you all of that high level idea on mounting it, drilling it. And also, we also include a template which gives you all the drill bits where you need to go ahead and drill all the necessary mounting brackets and everything. But in terms of power, we can actually support a 12 volt 1 amp input into these units here, and it goes in far more detail in the user manual as well as the quick information guide on our website.
Thank you so much, Tommy. I have another question about batteries. It says here, will you have any plans of battery backup devices as an upgrade?
Well, I don't necessarily have a battery backup. I think these units really depend on either being driven as PoE, but what you can do as an alternative to PoE is to in essence have a battery that would be a backup system that's outside of this unit itself. It's not necessarily one that we actually provide batteries. I think as a backup unit, it might be able to provide some backup. I would be interested in returning a question. Is a battery backup sort of a standard feature that are offered by many alternative access units? That would be something, because as a backup, yeah, I imagine that the battery might be able to last a few hours in a temporary blackout. But if it is a total blackout, then yeah, there might be some, issues where how long is good enough? You can have a battery that might be able to last, a half a day, but then yet that may not cover everything, for everybody. But that's a good input, though. As I think about it, how do you gain access into a system where you don't have it? And this is one of those things. If you do have a battery backup, you could back it up with a 12-volt amp and be able to have it read it, of course.
Thank you so much for that, Tommy. Next question here for you. Let's see, regarding SIP door access, will the entry door have two-way access, key entry and code at the same time?
Yes. In fact, you could actually put in a code if you want to. Let me go ahead and highlight this on the actual thing. You can actually put in a code here if you want to, or all of them, the i6s actually have an RFID area where you can have a key fob and just pass it by the key fob area. You could also have an external key fob as well that it could trigger. So if a company already has an existing one, you can actually use that one. There's no way to separate the key fob capability. You could integrate it here, but it could also perhaps take an external one as well. I could show that on the other thing where you can actually, post and host different key fobs. In fact, while you mentioned that, I'll go ahead and take a look at this one where you actually look at, let me see, security settings. Let me see, where was that? Camera settings. Let's see, device log, call list. Yeah, I don't necessarily have, but the great news, even with this call list, you can actually restrict the amount of devices based on ID so that you can actually have people set, what you do want and what you don't want. Oh, here we go. You can have a case here where you have a card setting, and then you could set up the different modes that you have, the type of mode settings that you want, features, RFID. This goes into two different columns. One is an 8H10D or the other one is HR10D. These are just open standards which give you the capability on configuring it. Just expanding it a little bit as well. I know at the camera settings, as I mentioned, you can actually have an image mode where you can actually sync this to a snapshot trigger mode. You can actually default into a server, or you can send it to the local SD card that you have in the actual unit, or you can actually do both. It really depends on how you want to go ahead and configure that unit moving forward. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tommy, so much. Next question. Can you tell us about the warranties on these devices?
Yes, all of these are warranted for 2 years. That includes our phones. Most of our phones, most of the alternative phones are only warranted for 1 year. We warrant our access units, intercoms, as well as the phones for 2 years.
Thank you so much, Tommy. Next question. For the video on the indoor-outdoor intercoms, are they a paid feature or free to access remotely?
The video, well, the video camera is already done. It depends on how you want to do it. Like, for example, in the camera settings here, anyone who has the ability to read RTSP information, this could be a video monitor. Like take, for example, if you were going to go into a casino, they have video streams, I mean, dozens, if not hundreds of them streaming throughout their security room. This will be one of the RTS streams that could be running into it. So it doesn't necessarily cost money to view the video, but in the case where I showed on the thing here for say if you wanted to use with Microsoft Teams, in this case, let me see, let's see, yeah, like here in this case, if you wanted to work with Microsoft Teams, there is a subscription video with CyberGate that you would have to just purchase, and they provide a small subscription fee. I don't know what it is, but you can ask them, and they'll just assign you a specific key that will work in conjunction and will bridge our Fanvil i6 things with the Microsoft Teams. So anybody who has Teams on their mobile phone would be able to just enable this account, and if somebody were to answer, you'll see their video, you could have an audio call with them, and you could assign a speed dial key which will allow them to access in and out of their office, their residence, or whatever they decide to put this onto.
Thank you so much, Tommy. Next question here. Regarding the I-55, 56, and 57A,
yep.
Will there be any issues if the current Android OS is no longer supported?
That's not necessarily true, because the Android that comes with these units are Android version 9.0. That's the latest Android offering. In fact, there are many people out there that are even offering these units sub Android version 8. Many of the new units out there require like 8 and above, and this actual operating system is something that would be supported for many years to come. It's not like the old units would limit it, but as you move forward, it's just like Windows. Many people may be eligible for Windows 11, but for those who are stuck back on the Windows 10, the PC still works, but then you're sort of limiting your capabilities of access moving forward. So it's not like you would be killed, but the great news is that all of the 57, 56, but these units here, the i53, 51, and 52, they're not Android-based. These are just all Linux-based, and they would be the same function, and then we would provide software updates as necessary to really improve operations or address any particular bug fixes. The only Android units we have here is in the upper corners, where you actually have the I-56 here, 55, and 57. These are the Android units that are coming up. The ones that we have today are the I-56A, and what's coming up new is the 57 and 56, which will have some speed dial keys as well. The I-56A is all solid state and touchscreen. The other ones will actually have speed dial keys on the side that will offer a little bit more flexibility, but those three are the Android-based units. Version 9.0 forward.
Well, thank you so much, Tommy. I appreciate that. If anyone goes to your website, I'm sure they'll find, plenty of product information and support. Will they also find someone, a person and a phone number to talk to anybody in person for tech support conversation and
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would highly suggest them that they could contact me. I've been in the industry for such a long time, and I sort of classify myself as an unofficial registered nurse. But we also have a person that could be a surgeon. That person resides on the East Coast on North America, and you can go ahead and provide that call access. Any email that you send to support, his name is Hector, you can actually go ahead and send him a message, and he could actually be accessed live, to you if necessary. I don't have his phone number, but if you actually sent it to support@fanvil.com, he's actually listed on there. And if you happen to identify yourself and your signature, and you happen to be located in the States, he can go ahead and respond to you and ultimately lead to a direct dial into him, so in case you are out in the field and need immediate support.
Excellent, Tommy. Thank you so much for answering all of those questions for us. And thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. And if anyone has, of course, any further questions, please feel free to contact your sales rep or email us at sales@microcomtech.com. And if you wish to view any of the products mentioned or shown here today, please visit us at www.microcom.us. And remember, this webinar presentation has been recorded and will be uploaded to our Microcom YouTube channel so you can view it again. Tommy, appreciate everything and all of your information today. Have a great day, and until next time, we will do this again. Thank you, Tommy.
Thank you very much, Julie. And for those who are interested in specific products, you can actually also send directly to Fanvil at sales@fanvil.com. I'm also subtract on that as well. So just let me know.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Tommy. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.